Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here, and as you probably know, there's going to be a Powerpuff Girls reboot coming in 2016. They're also making another Ben 10 show, but one topic at a time here. I honestly think this new Powerpuff Girls show is going to suck. And don't get me wrong, I want the show to be good. I would love to have a Powerpuff Girls show that was as good as the original, and I would love to have another show that I really like watching. And when it does come out, I am going to give it every chance I can possibly give it. I'm going to watch it, I'm going to try to clear my mind of all these things that I'm about to talk about right now, and I'm gonna just try to enjoy it as much as I possibly can, and we'll see what happens. But based upon everything I know about both the Powerpuff Girls and reboots, and everything I've learned in the past few years of working on this channel, leads me to believe that this reboot is going to be terrible. So, here are 5 reasons in no particular order as to why I think the Powerpuff Girls reboot has very little chance of succeeding. Alright, let's get this one out of the way first. Teen Titans Go. Look, I've said my piece on that show, I don't want to bash it any further than I already have, but here's the thing. Cartoon Network passed Teen Titans onto the wrong people there. They wanted to make a stupid show. And whether you think that's a good idea or not, it is most certainly not a good idea to give pre-existing characters that people already know and love to people who want to just make the lowest common denominator silly, stupid show. They don't really seem to respect or honor the original at all. They only use it to basically rip off plots and aesthetics from. And it's just really not what anyone wanted or expected from a Teen Titans show. Like, what if they took this Powerpuff Girls reboot and decided to make it super dark and gritty, just making it a pure action show? I think that would be a major disservice to the original show, which in its earlier seasons was primarily a comedy. It had action elements, of course, but it was mostly based in very clever satirical comedy. The mere existence of Teen Titans Go is not making me feel good about this new Powerpuff Girls reboot. Secondly, we know Craig McCracken and the voices of the 3 girls will not be returning. The Powerpuff Girls was a show that had a real style to it. If there was one thing you couldn't say about it, is that it was bland. Well, at least not until the later seasons, but more on that in a minute. My point being that when the show has such a strong tone and style and voice, you really need that creator to be there to push it forward. Only they have in their head the true vision for the series. I've seen it happen to SpongeBob, I've seen it happen to Community, and I've seen it happen to the original Powerpuff Girls. When the creator steps away from a series, either voluntarily or not, typically things go downhill very fast. I'm not saying other people couldn't do the show justice, but there's a high likelihood based upon other instances that that's not gonna happen. Additionally, the choice to recast the girls just confuses the heck out of me. You have Tara Strong on Twitter actively saying she still wants to voice Bubbles and that Cartoon Network never even approached her to voice her in the reboot, which is just the most confusing thing in the world to me. Like, I could understand if Tara was busy with some other project like Teen Titans Go, or she asked for too much money, or some creative difference or whatever. Like how Craig McCracken is working on a Disney show right now, so it's kind of understandable that he's not available. But outright having someone from the original show who voiced one of the 3 main characters, and I think E.G. Daily as well is doing the same thing on Twitter, actively saying she really wants to do this, and then just ignoring them? Like, what is the point behind that? I really don't get it. I can almost even understand bringing in a new showrunner to give the show a different direction and a different feel so it's not just a carbon copy of what came before it in a reboot, but what difference does it make if the voice actresses are the same or not? The voice actresses don't really contribute to the story or anything. It has nothing to do with you taking the show in a new direction. It's just, I don't know. I really don't understand this decision at all, and a little bit of credibility like this would make the show go a little bit further in making me believe it has a chance. To be fair though, Tom Kenny, as well as the voice of Ms. Keen and the voice of Mojo Jojo, have been confirmed to work on the show, but that just makes it even more confusing because it's clear they're not trying to go for a completely original thing. I don't understand this decision at all, and the fact that this sort of thing is happening when the people actively want to work on it and Cartoon Network is just rejecting them, yeah, that doesn't bode well at all. Number 3. Like I mentioned, the Powerpuff Girls later seasons, 5 and 6 specifically, although also parts of 4, sucked pretty hard. Craig McCracken left around the 5th season to work on the Powerpuff Girls movie, among other things. When Craig left, a lot of the soul of the show went with him. The show got into more action-y plots, except they weren't interesting action-y plots. There was a lot of episodes that just consisted of fighting, and not any sort of good fighting, I mean just really bland, boring fight scenes. The entirety of the revival of the Rowdy Rough Boys is just one overly long, boring fight scene that also includes really gross elements. There's another 22-minute episode that is dedicated to the Powerpuff Girls fighting these nanobots. There's not really any sort of interesting twist other than the fact that they shrink down and fight a bunch of identical-looking nanobots. It's not interesting, it's not compelling, it's certainly not funny, there's just nothing going for it. And even though Craig was gone, there was still a lot of other people that were working on the show that previously worked on the show. So even though they were there, just missing Craig alone was apparently enough to make the show really, really bland. Now imagine the show with entirely new people working on it. Maybe they'll do a good job, but there's no evidence so far to make me believe that they will. Only evidence to say that they probably won't. Which also kind of leads me into point number 4. They recently, and by recently I mean like a year ago, did a special called Dance Pantsed. It wasn't very good. Like, I went back and I watched it again, and I liked it even less than I liked it during that TV log. They screwed up some basic character stuff. Much like the later seasons of the show, it feels really bland and soulless. It's not very funny, it's not very compelling and interesting. The girls don't really have much individual personalities. It feels like exactly what it is, a special made many years later without the involvement of the main guy from the original show. I know they're not going to use that animation style for the new series, so most likely it won't have that much to do with Dance Pantsed, but the fact that they couldn't even pull off a one-episode special that well, again, doesn't bode well. Especially when, only a few years earlier, for the 10th anniversary, they made another special called Powerpuff Girls Rule, and that special is amazing. Seriously, I think it's one of the funniest and amazingly fast-paced episodes of the show. It is really amazing, and you know what the difference between that one and Dance Pantsed is? Craig McCracken worked on that one. And my last point is that this isn't the 90s anymore. And I don't mean this in a, oh man, cartoons were the best in the 90s kind of way. Honestly, I think cartoons are probably better off now in general, and a lot of cartoons that people associate with the 90s are actually early 2000s tunes anyway. But my point is that the original show did a lot of things that you probably couldn't get away with nowadays. There was a lot of really biting satire back then, and a lot of violence in the show. I grew up on the show, and I don't feel like a more violent person, so if I had to guess, I don't think the show was violent enough that it would scar any kids, but I definitely think it's more violent than a lot of the stuff we have today. There's blood in the theme song. There's literally blood in the theme song. It's not much, but it's there. And it's not just that. Do you honestly think they could do an episode like Equal Fights today without a million people on Tumblr screaming at Cartoon Network at how horrible and misogynist they're being? Or how about the episode of the original show that completely satirized the over-marketization of the Powerpuff Girls? Over-marketization, is that a word? I feel like that's not a word. I'm not so sure Cartoon Network would let them do that sort of episode, especially considering how much of a focus Cartoon Network puts on selling toys. If they were to make the Powerpuff Girls now, I feel like it would just be really declawed. Also, and this is probably more of a personal bias, but I think the show looked a lot better when it wasn't digitally inked. I think that very 90s thick line animation with faded colors, that's what I think of when I think of the Powerpuff Girls. I think that was so much of their identity, and I will remember that design way more than I will of their more digital, cleaner versions we got in the later seasons. And there you have it. That's 5 reasons why I just don't have any sort of faith that this show is going to be good. When it comes out, I'm gonna watch it, and if it ends up being good, then that's great. I would welcome the show with open arms and be more than happy to say that I was wrong here. But based on everything I know about reboots years later and not having creators present and how Cartoon Network has handled some of these reboots, all the evidence just lines up to paint a picture that this is most likely not going to be a good show. I usually criticize Nickelodeon for being the one that overly relies on reboots and spin-offs, but it seems like Cartoon Network might be heading down that path as well, and I don't like it. PIEGUYRULZ, out.